Welcome to Running It Back, the lessons learned from sports podcast. Mike Palmer here, joined as always by Tarlin Ray. We're going to be talking these songs of freedom. We're going to be talking about redemption on today's episode. Tarlin, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. I actually didn't text you because everyone is using the word redemption, so I'm not sure we can use it, but it is about redemption. One. Two, for those who are watching.
Do you want me to sing more Bob Marley? I mean, you just let that
No,
go.
we're going to do it. We'll do it. That's the intro. We'll let it on the outro. Anytime you can sing, you can do it in the middle,
Okay.
too, whenever you want. Whenever you want
Just
to take
checking.
the mic. Those watching on YouTube always, this is a fantastic haircut that you got rocking today.
Right.
We may be talking about another Big Red, so we'll get there.
I don't have the second mirror for the back, but it's square in the back. I checked it out. I signed off. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were saying you did that yourself. Hopefully,
No.
Okay.
I went to a professional.
This is not 2020. You can
Slope cuts. Those you in Park Slope. Check them out.
It's a Slope Cuts, soon to be a sponsor.
No, Mike sent you. Yeah.
Big Mike. 3, we've done one pod, middle of the day, late in the day, West Coast time.
Right.
Some who are longtime fans, 39th floor in San Diego. So this is our first pod midday.
Right.
You asked me how I'm doing, my temperaments.
Yeah.
I am a little spicy sometimes in the morning, but I feel okay. I'm awake.
You're appropriately caffeinated, hydrated.
Oh, all of it.
You've done all the appropriate. You're ready to achieve liftoff.
And last, because it's appropriate story, because we're going to lead into a topic of redemption and talk about two people, one person in particular who definitely knows injuries. I've been, for those who've been following the walking challenge, I might have had a crazy walking challenge, step challenge. And last year, we had a follow-up step challenge at the company organization I work at. 9 of us for 13 straight weeks. We got over 60,000 steps every week. But over the last 6+ months, I've been in pain. And I couldn't figure out what was going on with my hip. So I've done training sessions. Shout out to Body by Barry. Mike, you do a great job. I went to 2 physical therapists, felt great. But I finally got an x-ray and then finally went last night to get an MRI. I got results on my hip waiting on my back. And I have a hip labral tear.
Oh.
So it's like a real thing.
Wow.
And I share this because I'm going to figure out how to do not forced surgery. For those who are really longtime fans, remember we started potting
right when
while
you were
laid up with an Achilles tear. So as my buddies like to say, I am injury prone. If you think about my right side, I got a screw in my right foot from a Jones fracture, torn Achilles, and now hip labral tear. Look that up.
I'll bring up a Samuel Jackson from that M. Night Shyamalan thing where he's unbreakable, but he's actually very breakable, right?
Yeah, very breakable. Yeah. So word out to our listeners. Please listen to your body. Your body screams pain. Listen to the pain. Do something about it. It took 6+ months. I'm stupid. I'm an idiot. But I will fight back. And the reason that is relevant for the person we'll talk about, Big Red, Bill Walton, rest in peace. Yeah. Because this is a person who for years did not listen to his body and played through pain.
Right. That sucks. Sorry to hear that. Yeah. If you do happen to be laid up again, we have, we know how to record. At the time, we weren't doing video. So we'll definitely have to figure out, if you're,
see me horizontal with the leg up
in traction. We want to get the full body cast into the shot. We'll have to figure out where to put the webcam. But yeah, Big Red, your example as well. Like there is the whole adage that you got to play hurt back in the day. There was a virtue to playing through pain, not opting out, not tapping out, having some resilience, some get after itness. Now we're entering this other age where folks are hothouse flowers. They're delicate creatures that need to be managed to and supported around. That also brings in the other aspect of our story where we did want to talk redemption and talk Kyrie Irving, who is right now going through a redemption story right up there with 1999 Latrell Sprewell coming back.
Wait a minute, pause.
Suspension.
We did the Knicks.
What?
We did the Knicks the last show. We did the Knicks.
We're talking redemption. We're talking NBA redemption.
I'm calling foul.
Bouncing back. So we want to talk those two stories, I mean, we were planning on doing the Kyrie one anyway, and then Big Red went off and died on us. So we do need to at least give a few words to Bill Walton. But I think the main thing we were gonna try to dive into is redemption stories and understand how they relate to the stories that we're seeing in the NBA today, particularly around the Mavericks, who we've been talking about. And also, I do have to eat my words a little bit. I was not on Team Luca. I was not on Team Dallas. I was not on Team Kyrie. The jury's still out. I think I'm pod committed to ride the Celtics home this playoff season in honor of Bill Walton. Offense wins games. Defense wins championships. They're deep. They're mob deep in Boston. I'm sticking with that side of the story. But what are your thoughts on Bill Walton? I know you're right near UCLA there, right? Like it's not far.
Yeah, I'm
from
gonna take the Mavs. So Bill Walton, we will get to the fact that he is named one of the top 50 players of all time and also one of the top 75 players of the 75th anniversary. Most people don't know that Walton in high school really didn't play on varsity until his junior year, but they were 62-2 dominant in high school. He then goes off to UCLA to be a part of the UCLA factory built John Wooden. As I said, UCLA was the early NIL factory because there was no way we were paying players to be that dominant in hoops. But Bill Walton, not allowed to play as a freshman, went on in his sophomore and junior year to win 88 straight games. So there was a period of time from Walton's in the middle of his junior year to the middle of his senior year, he never lost a basketball game.
Yeah.
Averaged 29 points, 25 rebounds in high school. He was a 3-time player of the year in college, 2-time champion in college. He was all world. Number 1 pick for Portland Trailblazers, brought Portland a championship. So this was the early Sam Bowie when they made that disastrous pick, even after Walton went through foot and ankle injuries. They said, let's go for another big man. He won't get hurt. And won the finals MVP in the year that the Trailblazers won, but also the next year won the NBA MVP. So this was, for a period of time, one of the more dominant players you've ever seen. He also forced a trade from Portland. So this is the early days of players forcing a trade because he wasn't happy with the way that Portland handled his injuries. Went to go play for the Clip Show. Disastrous run with the Clippers. Yeah. And then had a redemption year. Redemption had his comeback playing off the bench for the Celtics and won his second championship. So all told, Walton could have played in 1,148 games in the regular season. He played in 40% of them.
Yeah.
40%. And yet he was considered one of the best to ever play the game. So the reason I want to make some connection to Kyrie is Walton was very controversial. I mean, very. They called him a trailblazing radical. Yeah. He was polarizing because of his anti-government stances. Mm-hmm. He refused to take pharmaceutical drugs for his healing. He believed in alternative, I'm using air quotes as they call it, alternative medicine. He was a vegetarian. Vegetarian? Are you crazy? Back in the day in the Nixon, and he also was against the Vietnam War. So this is the Nixon administration that was trying to use athletes to promote the war and back the U.S., and Walton was not willing to play. Walton,
he was too busy following Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead. Yeah.
Walton in his early days, in his freshman year, he showed up, or maybe it was sophomore year, he showed up to UCLA. My dad told me this story the other day, and John Wooden had very strict rules. Got to have your hair short like yours, no facial hair. And Walton showed up with a big beard and long hair and said, hey, we should be free. We should do whatever we want to do. And he says, you're right. We'll miss you. So Walton was sort of the anti-hero. He was someone early on that said the Star-Spangled Banner should not be the national anthem because it promoted war, bombing, and killing. Yeah. So we got wrapped up in this guy. No pharmaceuticals. Does that sound a little bit like no vaccine? You got someone who doesn't believe in the Star-Spangled Banner. It's like Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf and Colin Kaepernick. He was all of that and also a dominant player. So it's interesting that years later, for someone who only scored 6,215 points in the NBA, it's if you look at the top 50, top 75, or top 50 players, it's the least amount of points he was scored. He had
Yeah.
4,923 rebounds. It's like the 13th best, and he's barely better than some guards. And he ranked 47th in assists. That he's considered an all-time player. What do you think about that?
Right. Well, I'll go back, let the record reflect. The number one ability is availability. And
And he wasn't
even though
available.
he had limited availability, but when he was there, you got all of him. There was no question of what he was giving, and he was smart enough to evolve as a player. When injuries started to slow him down, he wound up winning Sixth Man of the Year with that Celtics team, where he could spell Parrish or McHale and they wouldn't really lose a lot, and he wouldn't have to put in too many minutes. He'd put in like 15, 20 minutes. It is interesting, I do think a little bit about the evolution of some of the older players like a KD, like where is he going to evolve? Is he going to be able to kind of adapt and adjust? Could he be a good six man later on in his career? Or is he more, there is that kind of disease of the alpha where, we're expecting all these players to be the number one dominant player. Frequently, players don't evolve to the point where they can then be a role player later in their career. And I thought he was really among the primary examples of that, where he was the most dominant player in college and in the NBA. And then he was clearly, probably about the sixth best player on a great championship team. And in a lot of ways, that evolution is something we're kind of tracking for all these, including LeBron. Maybe LeBron needs to go somewhere. The other thing that we're not saying when we talk about Big Red, aside from shout out to Coach Wooden and the Pyramid of Success, Ted Lasso, there is a lot to be learned from there. The other thing I take from Walton is his career as a broadcaster. Throw it down, big man. Terrible, terrible. He was like eating a lit cupcake. He actually bit into a lit cupcake as part of that late game NCAA. Always fun to tune him in when who knows what he's doing, where his head is coming from, but it always made for entertaining viewing. There is an element of him becoming a working personality who was a bon vivant, a great spirit, who kind of continued to light up everyone who was around him. That's the Bill Walton that I really remember, and I will really appreciate how bright his spirit really came through. And I think that's also where he probably helped uplift that 86 team, in part because he was just a good dude who knew how to kind of roll with the chemistry of the squad. And then I think that opens up to Kyrie kind of surprising us now, perhaps in learning how to be a good chemistry guy. But I don't know if you had other thoughts on Bill Walton.
Diehard UCLA fan. So I grew up listening to Walton cover Pac-12 games. Him talking about the most random things, and Dave Pasch, who is his longtime partner, just hanging in with the Waltonisms as he's rocking a tie-dye shirt. And who knows if he's talking, it could be the Bruins versus the Cubs or the Bearcat. Like he's just describing animals. He's describing the sun, rock formations, nothing to do with the X's and O's. But he always described himself as the luckiest guy in the world. A couple of things I want to just call out. You mentioned the Celtics team. Larry Bird, who gives no compliments, said he is as good as any player when healthy. And someone said, any Celtic? He goes, no, any player. So that is, remember that line, because that's ultimate respect that people can see beyond the 39 surgeries that he had just to play. You mentioned his broadcast career, but when we even had a chance to hear that broadcast career, one, he was a pretty controversial guy. So we're not tracking, he's a champion, but he really is the anti-hero. He's against the government, against a lot of things that the mainstream believes in. But yet he was sort of that guy. Outsider. Maybe Portland was the right place. Keep it weird, Portland. But he was an outsider. So the broadcasting career, one, it might have never happened. He had a massive stutter. And so he was given great advice as to how to overcome his stutter, taught to slow down, became a teacher. And the feedback was be a teacher anywhere on any subject. And he really applied that. So we think about this arc where someone is a winner, someone could be a heel because it's going against everything that we know in mainstream, which at times is scary. And now he is massively beloved. Is it because he no longer believes those things, or he's had a chance to grow as an individual? He
Yeah.
said on a trip back to Portland, and this was years later because Portland was feting him, he's here to make amends. He had some mistakes and errors of the past, regretted not being a better person, a better player, regretted getting hurt. He wasn't saying that I should have never said anything I did or believed. He said, I made mistakes.
Yeah.
So, how long we're a industry, we're trained to celebrate people, and then, especially because of social and the environment right now, to tear people down. So,
Yeah.
how long will is we call it redemption? And I was working with my trainer who believes in recidivism, folks going to jail and coming out, people who have are alcoholics and being able to recover. When are we going to give people grace? He and I hadn't done any of the research because I still call Kyrie flat earther. He's flat earther, but he said he recanted and he didn't realize the impact he could have on children. Right? We still don't forgive Kyrie, or folks had a hard time forgiving Kyrie because during COVID, the New York state law required you to have a vaccine to participate in a work environment in New York. And he did not get the vaccine, so you can only play away games. People were pissed because he wasn't available. He had
Yeah.
the controversy with the movie, which most said was anti-Semitic. And the
Hmm.
way that he apologized, getting a 5-game suspension, folks didn't believe he was contrite and understood the
Yeah.
impact he had with his words. So there's a multitude of things that are surrounding Kyrie that are in the public sphere. But what struck me, and the reason I chatted you, was I was watching Kyrie get interviewed by the Inside NBA TNT crew.
Yeah.
Shout out to Barkley, Shaq, my first boss when I got out
Yeah.
of college, Kenny, the Jet Smith, Ernie Johnson. It was just he just seemed like a different guy. The energy around him seemed like it was more of a teacher. He
Yeah.
was not falling into the hype against going against Anthony Edwards. He is not one to bitch about calls. He just seems like he is in a
Yeah.
very like moment. And the way he talked is like, it was smart. It was something that you can see why the Mavericks team adapts him. This is a long way to say, yeah, everyone sees this redemption because he's playing well. But everyone in the league, at least the players that play with him, have known forever that he's a good dude, or that the way he acts in the locker room is great. So what does it really take to allow someone to progress in life? Is it only winning, or are there other things that will enable us to see people a different way?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was partly that the Mavericks saw a distressed asset in Kyrie Irving that they thought was worth taking a flyer on. And there are a lot of missed flyers that have been part of the story lately, whether it's James Harden multiple times, arguably Kawhi and Paul George with the Clippers, clearly Ben Simmons. People take a flyer on a distressed asset and it doesn't play and it just doesn't wind up working out. Enough flyers out there, one or two of them's going to come in. In the case of Kyrie, the fact that he's kind of maturing in his private life, having kids, kind of settling down a little bit, he's ready for another chapter in his career. And if you look at Kyrie's work history, when he was with LeBron, he was kind of miserable because he had to be his number two. And also LeBron maybe didn't know how to be number one to Kyrie's 1A. But then he left to try to be the alpha, to try to be the number one guy. Really didn't work in Boston for a number of reasons. He didn't have the maturity to lead the younger guys who he's now going to be playing against. Brooklyn was a shit show on multiple levels. He was certainly contributing to it, but it was a crazy time and just a bad environment. Shout out to Cuban and the Mavs for taking a flyer here, and then also seeing perhaps enough parallels to LeBron back in the day, how Kyrie fit there early in his career and how they were able to be a dominant team, to now seeing, okay, we already have this asset in Luka. Could Kyrie actually pair with him? And there was a lot of blowback then where they're not going to be able to play well together, and or they're not going to be able to play defense. And that's where, it's also a maturity thing where, Kyrie is now approaching that veteran leadership phase in his career, and he might have more of that skill set, kind of akin to, the teacher that Bill Walton was. Kyrie certainly does seem like he wants to mentor, lead, and teach people. Maybe he's finding a better outlet for that now under the Zen master, Jason Kidd.
So let's just think back. One of the things that you said, a distress asset. No one ever challenged or had any concern about his ability, whether or not the dude can play. 8-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA, 2016 Olympic champion. The shot in Game 7 with 53 seconds left to hit a three. He and LeBron only duo to score over 40 points in an NBA Finals. The dude can ball. By far the best ball handler in the league. So when you say it's a distress asset, it's because people believed it's all about his character. It's all about whether or not
his availability, and it was character.
But he was available beyond COVID. He was available, right? So I'm not saying the things that he did were wrong, but it's more, and I've been pressed on, when do you allow someone, if it's about maturity, we're all mature. If it's really just maturing, allow that to happen, because Cuban wasn't really taking a fly because that's one of the best dudes in the league. And do we ever question he wanted to leave LeBron? LeBron, I mean, probably not that easy to deal with.
For sure. But I think the availability question, due to something besides physical availability to play, and that's where, again, I did my homework and listened to our previous Running It Back episode from November of 2021, when we were talking how Kyrie was a lightning rod in the eye of the hurricane at the time, where he was being singled out. At the time, we were also talking about, could you create an accepting enough environment to actually allow a Kyrie to thrive? At the time, we were hoping Steve Nash was the Zen master, but in reality, looks like Jason Kidd was. And I think the risk really was Kyrie just going to walk away from basketball? Like, how far was he from Ben Simmons in the way that we thought about him at the time he was leaving the Nets? They were pretty close, I think, in the way people were thinking about the two of them. More hope for Kyrie, but they were kind of in the same conversation. Same for Harden. And now I think, Simmons' Met Gala outfit notwithstanding, Simmons is pretty much out of basketball by this
point. What do you mean? I saw a video. He was working out and he hit a jumper. He does his summer videos he sends out before.
Redemption, the doors stay open until you're physically unable to come back through them. But it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in terms of the younger guys who Kyrie wasn't ready to lead when he was in Boston.
Let me put on that. Tatum and Brown. So when Kyrie was there, the last year, it was Tatum's. He had 1 year under his belt. Brown 2, and they still connect. They still see those years and what they were able to learn from Kyrie as pretty special. I mean, that was such a young team. They had Robert Williams was a rookie. Smart was 4 years. Horford was still there. Damn, he's been there. He was 11 years at that time. So I think what you hit on is a maturity level. You expect these guys in the open in front of millions of people to have maturity level. So are we just seeing, rightfully, someone mature? So most NBA players hit their peak skill level at 27, 28. He just hit his peak. He's hitting his peak maturity level. And so to a person, every hooper loves Kyrie, not from just his skill, but the way he treats them. So there's a disconnect between the 5 to 6 moments that Kyrie's seeing out in the world and what's actually happening behind closed doors, which is why he got another job, why he continues to get jobs, why he continues to get tons of money, because people see the ability. And so that's just my challenge. I'm quick. I called him a flat earther. I don't believe in his anti-Semitic position or way he was trying to promote Black people in support of that movie. But I'm just trying to figure out how to give folks more grace, because our click moment will be to write someone off. And I have a hard time comparing Ben Simmons to Kyrie. Ben's not even close to the player. I'm just trying to.
Well, I mean, hindsight's 2020. Like, I guess or 2021 in this case. Like, at the time, it was probably peak negative perception of Kyrie.
I was in, like,
as opposed to now. But at the same time, even then, there was some recognition that, just like Bill Walton, Kyrie is not a conformist. He's not someone who, if you are like Tibbs, for example, and the Knicks, and I'm going to bring it back there. If you were to bring Kyrie into that style of play right now, it wouldn't work. If you bring it into Jason Kidd and Luka, the dynamics are different, where their 1 and their 1A is unprecedented offensive capability. But I think culturally that wouldn't necessarily fit with more of a team first, hustle. They're going at it as hard as they can, Dallas, but I don't know if they really have that dog in them. That's what we'll see, because I do think
That's why I'm taking the Mavs.
I think JrueHolliday and Derrick White, I think they might give a little more fight, because the problem with Ant-Man is he's stuck with the cat.
So I'm taking the Mavs. Looking at Kyrie in 2021, he was a walking controversy. Hard to see him from the outside as someone being a leader. I'm not going back on that, and was not available.
It's also, he could have been suspended from the league. Like even at the time of the anti-Semitism, he was becoming closer to like where Ja Morant is.
100%.
And Ja's a good one to think about, I think, in terms of redemption, where I think everyone wants to see that redemption story because he's younger and hopefully we can see it turn around sooner. But it is great to see Kyrie come back at this point in his career. Even the way he handled Ant coming after him.
That's what I mean. That to me, humility, you can see from the way that he's talking to the guys, and I'm really focused on those players who are not complaining after every call. He's the one containing, controlling that group. I appreciate, I've done some deeper digging into his Anta shoes, Hella. That's his name from his standing Roxu heritage. His mom was part of that group, that tribe. And so seeing the shoe with tassels, and it really is a shout out to his indigenous people. There's something that Kyrie stands for. What is hard is when you're that individual and you're not in the mainstream. When you're the Walton, he was not in the mainstream when he was at UCLA and conformed, right? And then he was Portland, and he was causing, like, the fact he's saying, I will not take pharmaceutical. How is it not? It's like, we weren't there.
Very similar.
It's very similar. Mm-hmm. But at the time, I'm sure he was getting crushed. And then he goes to the Clippers, and I'm sure they're like, whatever, is it the Clippers? So that's 4 years of the Clippers. It's 4 years with the Nets. And then he has a similar arc where he comes and he takes a step back. He's a sixth man of the year, and he's playing with Bird. All I'm calling out is, hey, no, in that 4 years of the Nets, and he's doing stuff that's crazy, and he has his own beliefs, and he'll say, I'm doing my own research. Like, what the hell does that mean? Yeah. It's hard to look at the person when it's just he's screaming into a hurricane.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is, how do we start? And this goes to dialogue do we have in general in the public about anything? Stop to just take a moment and say, all right, that's his opinion. No, I mean, don't disagree or not, and let that person be. It's hard, but all I'm comparing, to me, it's a great comp to Walton because he's leaving with none of that. It's all the tie-dye shirts and the Grateful Dead and the crazy things in broadcasting. He's a top 75 player. If you look at the top 75 list, Kyrie's not there.
Right.
And would he be? Yes. He
might be in there with the chip this year, though. Yeah.
But if he didn't have that controversy, then, and he had distance like Walton did, he's a top 75 player.
Yeah. I was surprised when he wasn't.
It's nasty.
Start looking at the bottom of that list too. You're kind of
exactly. So that's all I'm saying. So for a moment, and I got pushed. Once again, my trainer's pushing me. When are you going to give people grace? Everyone just wants to pile on people if they made a mistake. Walton believes he made mistakes. He didn't say that at that moment he didn't believe, but he said he made mistakes. So I'm just trying to take a different stance. I'm not going back on what I said, but he really was challenging individual. The stuff he was saying was hot nonsense at times. I just didn't believe in it. But when are you going to give someone who's showing himself through his charity work, through his work with indigenous people, through listening to him talk about his team, like that's him. And you can see this aura around him. He's just at peace.
Yeah.
So when can we learn from that? Not everything you're going to say you're never going to agree with everything people say, but when you're going to learn from that package, that's all I'm pushing.
I'm with you. And I want to see if that aura of peace maintains when JrueHolliday and Derrick White have him on lockdown, which is a separate idea.
Last
thing I would say is just to quote the great Bob Marley, these songs of freedom are all I ever had. Redemption songs. Redemption songs. Tarlin, thanks so much for joining me on today's episode.
Karaoke will be back next week.
And for our listeners, thank you for listening. This is Running It Back.